The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the kind that settles naturally over a house before dinner. This was arranged silence, waiting silence. The kind that makes your skin tighten before your mind can catch up. I stepped into the banquet room behind my parents' house on my 32nd birthday, expecting awkward small talk, maybe a cake I didn't ask for, maybe one of my mother's overly polished family moments. Instead, I found nearly 200 relatives seated in rows that faced the center of the room like I was about to be cross-examined. No music, no candles, no laughter. Just faces. My mother, Patricia Dixon, stood beside the wall of family photos with both hands clasped in front of her like she was preparing for church. My father, Richard, sat at the head of the room with a folder in front of him so thick it looked like a legal case file. My younger sister Megan leaned against the doorway, smiling like she already knew how the night would end. That was the moment I understood this was never a birthday dinner. It was a performance. And I was the sacrifice. "Holly," my father said into a microphone, "I still don't know who thought to rent. Come stand up front." A few people avoided my eyes. Most didn't. I could feel every step I took across that floor. My heels sounded too loud. My breathing sounded wrong. Somewhere in the back, a fork hit a plate, and even that seemed cruel. Then my father opened the folder. "This," he said, lifting a stack of printed pages, "is a complete record of what your mother and I spent raising you." I stared at him. Food, clothes, school tuition, medical bills, birthday gifts. He listed them calmly, like he was reading quarterly losses to a boardroom. Then he turned to the final page. $400,000. A ripple moved through the room. "Every dollar we spent raising you," he said, looking straight at me, "and now it's time you paid this family back. If quiet strength means something to you, subscribe." What happened next only got worse. Because before I could speak, my mother reached for the first frame on the wall and tore my childhood photo straight down the middle. The sound of the glass frame hitting the floor didn't shatter. It cracked. A dull, sharp snap that echoed through the room in a way that made my chest tighten. My mother didn't look at me when she picked up the next frame. For 32 years, I had memorized that wall. Every birthday, every holiday, my kindergarten photo with the crooked smile, my high school graduation. A picture of me and Grandma Eleanor sitting on her porch swing. Memories arranged neatly like proof that we were a normal family. My mother pulled down the second frame. "Holly," she said calmly, almost gently, "has always had a problem with gratitude." She tore the photo in half. Someone near the front gasped quietly, but no one stood up. Not one person. My father cleared his throat and tapped the stack of papers on the table like he was reminding the room what they were here for. $400,000, he repeated. The microphone made the number sound even colder. For food, housing, school, opportunities. He looked up at me. "Everything we gave you." My throat felt dry, but my voice still worked. "You're billing me," I said slowly, "for being your daughter?" The words floated out into the room and landed somewhere between disbelief and exhaustion. My father didn't flinch. "You had choices, Holly," he said. "You chose to turn your back on this family." A murmur rippled through the relatives. That was the part that almost made me laugh. Because the truth was the opposite. Growing up in the Dixon house meant understanding one thing very early. There were two types of children. Megan and everyone else. Megan was 4 years younger, prettier, louder, and somehow always shining in my parents' eyes like she was the future of the entire family. When she entered a room, my mother lit up. When she failed at something, my father called it learning. When I succeeded, it was usually treated like background noise. I glanced toward Megan now. She was leaning against the doorway with her arms folded, watching me the way people watch courtroom dramas on television, curious to see the verdict. My mother ripped another photograph off the wall. "You manipulated your grandmother," she said, louder this time. "You isolated her." The room shifted. "Grandma Eleanor. That was the real reason we were here." If you've ever been the quiet child in a loud family, you already know how these moments feel. You spend years learning to shrink just enough to keep the peace. But something inside me that night was already changing. Because the next thing Megan did made the entire room lean forward. She stepped beside me, reached into my purse, and pulled out my car keys. For a second, I thought Megan was joking. The way she dangled my car keys between two perfectly manicured fingers had that same casual, almost playful energy she used when we were kids and she wanted attention. But there was nothing playful in her eyes. "Thanks for bringing these," she said lightly. The metal keys swung in the air. "I'll need them." My brain took a moment to catch up with the words. "You'll… what?" She smiled wider. Dad already transferred the title to me. A few people in the front row leaned closer like they didn't want to miss a single second of the show. I looked at my father. He didn't deny it. He didn't even look uncomfortable. Instead, he folded his hands over the thick stack of papers like the entire moment was just another line item in the evening's agenda. "You won't be needing that vehicle anymore," he said calmly. Something inside my chest went very still. Not rage. Not panic. Just a strange, quiet emptiness. For years, I had explained moments like this away. Megan didn't mean it. Mom was stressed. Dad was under pressure at work. Families are complicated. But standing there in front of 200 silent witnesses, watching my sister casually claim my car like it was a party favor, I realized something that felt both painful and strangely freeing. They weren't confused. They weren't misunderstood. They were exactly who they had always been. My mother reached for another photograph on the wall. This one was from my nursing school graduation. I remembered that day clearly. Top of my class. My coworkers from the hospital cheering. My grandmother crying quietly in the audience. My parents had been late. Megan hadn't come at all. My mother pulled the frame down. "A daughter who never appreciated what she had," she said. "Rip." The sound echoed through the room. That was when my eyes landed on Aunt Ruth near the back row. She was the only person in the entire room who looked like she might stand up. Her hands were clenched in her lap, her face pale. But she gave me the smallest nod. And that tiny gesture reminded me of something my grandmother used to say whenever life felt unfair. "Strength isn't loud, sweetheart. Sometimes strength is simply knowing when you no longer have to stand there and take it. If you understand quiet strength, you belong here. Subscribe and stand with us." Because the next thing my father said revealed the real reason they invited 200 people to watch my birthday. And it had nothing to do with the $400,000 bill. It had everything to do with my grandmother's house. My father straightened the stack of papers in front of him like a judge preparing to deliver a ruling. "The solution is simple," he said. His voice had that same business tone he used when talking about real estate deals at the dinner table growing up. Cold, efficient, final. "You can repay the $400,000 your mother and I invested in raising you." He paused long enough for the number to settle in the room. "Or, you can sign away your claim to your grandmother's house." There it was. The real reason for the microphones. The witnesses. The theater. The room buzzed softly. A few cousins leaned toward each other, whispering. My heart beat once, slow, heavy. "My claim?" I repeated. My father slid a document across the long table. "A contract. All you need to do," he said, "is sign here. You relinquish any rights to the property, and we forget this entire unpleasant situation." My fingers didn't move toward the paper. Not yet. Because something about the way he said it felt strange. Too confident. Like he was repeating something he had never actually verified. "You've read Grandma's will?" I asked quietly. He frowned. "I don't need to read it." That answer landed harder than anything else that night. "You don't need to read it?" I said. "The house belongs to the family," he snapped. "It always has." Behind him, my mother ripped another photograph from the wall. Pieces of my life were now scattered across the floor around her shoes. She manipulated a dying woman, my mother told the room. She isolated her from the rest of us. Someone in the back muttered something under their breath. I didn't bother looking. Instead, I studied my father's face carefully. Because the more I looked, the more something else appeared beneath the anger. Not certainty. Assumption. You never saw the will, I said. It wasn't a question. His jaw tightened. That lawyer sent you a letter. I haven't opened it yet. A ripple moved through the audience. And suddenly, for the first time all night, my father didn't look completely in control. Megan stepped closer to him. Just sign the paper, Holly, she said under her breath. Her voice had lost some of its confidence now. This doesn't have to be messy. I looked down at the contract on the table, then at the torn photos on the floor, then at my sister still holding my car keys. Then I thought about the last night I sat beside Grandma Eleanor's bed, the way she held my hand and whispered something I didn't fully understand at the time. Live like you deserve to, sweetheart. Slowly, I pushed the document back across the table. I'm not signing anything tonight. The microphone picked up every word. My father slammed his hand down. Then you're no longer a Dixon. 200 people watched. And I realized something surprising. I wasn't afraid anymore. Tell me where you're listening from. Moments like this remind us how many people quietly face the same kind of family pressure. Because the next thing I did shocked everyone in that room. I turned around and walked toward the door. No one tried to stop me. That might have been the strangest part. 200 people had gathered to witness the moment I was supposed to break to cry, argue, beg, or sign the paper just to make the humiliation end. Instead, they watched me walk away. My heels tapped steadily across the wooden floor. The sound seemed louder now that no one was speaking. Behind me, my father's voice followed like a final warning. If you walk out that door, Holly, don't expect to come back. I didn't turn around. Because for the first time in my life, the idea of not coming back didn't feel like a threat. It felt like oxygen. When I reached the front door, my hand paused on the handle. Not because I was reconsidering, because something on the wall beside the door caught my eye. One photograph my mother hadn't gotten to yet. Grandma Eleanor and me sitting on her porch swing, her hand resting over mine. The picture had been taken the week before she passed away. For a moment, I almost took it down with me. But I didn't. Somehow, leaving it there felt right. Let them look at it. Let them remember. I opened the door and stepped into the cool night air. The noise from inside the house faded the moment the door closed behind me. No shouting. No footsteps chasing after me. Just silence again. I walked down the driveway slowly. Halfway to the street, headlights flashed once from a parked car. Danny, right where he said he'd be. I slid into the passenger seat and shut the door. He didn't start driving right away. He just looked at me carefully. You okay? I exhaled slowly, staring through the windshield at the house I had grown up in. The lights in the dining room glowed through the windows. I could still see silhouettes moving around inside. They billed me, I said quietly, for being born. Danny shook his head slowly. I wish I could say I'm surprised. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then he started the car. As we pulled away from the curb, my phone buzzed for the first time. Then again. Then again. By the time we reached the end of the block, the screen was lighting up nonstop. Mom. Dad. Megan. Call after call. Message after message. Danny glanced over. You gonna answer? I turned the phone face down on my lap. No. Because something had shifted inside me during that walk to the door. For the first time in 32 years, I realized something important. Silence isn't weakness. Sometimes silence is the moment you finally stop explaining yourself to people who never intended to understand. If respect matters to you, subscribe. Because the next 4 days would reveal something my family never expected. The truth about my grandmother's will. And why they suddenly started calling me 80 times a day. By the time Danny dropped me at my apartment, my phone had recorded 53 missed calls. I didn't listen to a single voicemail. Not that night. Danny stayed on the couch like he had 100 times during nursing school when one of us pulled a brutal overnight shift and the other was too tired to drive home. Some friendships don't need explanations. They just show up. He made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the dark screen of my phone. Finally, he asked, "Do you want to talk about it?" I shook my head. Not yet. Because if I started talking, 32 years of memories were going to come out all at once. And I wasn't sure I was ready to hear my own voice say them. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out the cream-colored envelope that had been sitting unopened in my mailbox for 2 weeks. Law Offices of Gerald Whitmore, my grandmother's lawyer. I turned it over slowly in my hands. Danny noticed. That the letter your sister asked about? Yeah. You gonna open it? I stared at the envelope for another long second. Then I slid my finger under the seal. The paper inside was thick and formal. Dear Miss Dixon, we respectfully request your presence at our office regarding matters related to the estate of Eleanor Mitchell. Please contact us to schedule a meeting. That was it. No details. No explanation. Just a request to come in. Danny leaned over my shoulder. That's it? That's it. But the moment I read the name Eleanor Mitchell, something warm and painful settled in my chest. My grandmother. The only person in my family who had ever looked at me like I wasn't a disappointment waiting to happen. 3 years earlier, when she was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, my parents talked about hiring help. Megan suggested a nursing home. I quit my job at the hospital and moved into Grandma's little house on the edge of town. 3 years of medications, doctor visits, late nights, sitting beside her bed. 3 years that somehow passed faster than the rest of my life. My parents visited maybe once a month. Megan twice. But Grandma and we talked about everything. Life. Regret. Family. One night near the end, she squeezed my hand and said something I didn't fully understand at the time. They'll show you who they are someday. I folded the letter carefully and placed it on the table. Danny crossed his arms. So when's the meeting? I checked the bottom of the page. My stomach tightened. Tomorrow morning. Danny raised an eyebrow. Well, he said quietly, sounds like your birthday party might not have gone the way your parents planned. Some of you listening have been through moments like this when the truth starts surfacing in ways nobody expected. Drop your city below. I always wonder how far these stories travel. Because the next morning, when I walked into that lawyer's office, I finally understood why my family was suddenly so desperate. The office of Gerald Whitmore smelled like polished wood and old paper. The kind of place where voices naturally lower and conversations slow down. I sat in a leather chair across from his desk while he adjusted a pair of reading glasses and opened a thick folder. For a moment he simply studied me. You look exactly like your grandmother, he said. That caught me off guard. Most people say I look like my mother. Whitmore smiled faintly. No, he said gently. You have Eleanor's eyes. Something in my chest tightened. He slid a document across the desk. Your grandmother prepared her will 3 years ago, he said, shortly after you moved in with her. I leaned forward. The paper looked official, stamped, notarized, carefully prepared. My parents said the house belongs to the family, I said. Whitmore folded his hands. That assumption, he replied calmly, appears to be the source of the current conflict. My stomach sank slightly. Meaning? He tapped the first page of the document. Your grandmother left her home to one person. I felt my pulse quicken. To who? Whitmore looked directly at me. You. The word seemed to hang in the air between us. Just me? I asked. Yes. He turned the page toward me so I could see the signature at the bottom. Eleanor Mitchell. The same careful handwriting I had seen on birthday cards for years. The property was appraised last year, he continued. Approximately $650,000, fully paid off. My mind struggled to catch up. That can't be right. Whitmore leaned back slightly. Your grandmother was very clear about her reasoning. He opened another page and read aloud. To my granddaughter Holly, who cared for me with patience, dignity, and love when others found it inconvenient. My vision blurred for a moment. Whitmore paused. She believed you earned the house. I swallowed hard. My father said the family would share it. Whitmore nodded slowly. Your father never requested a copy of the will. He didn't read it? No. A strange mixture of sadness and disbelief washed over me. Everything that had happened the night before. The $400,000 bill. The public humiliation. The torn photographs. All of it had been built on an assumption they never bothered to verify. Whitmore flipped to the final page. There is also one additional clause your grandmother insisted on including. Something in his tone made me sit up straighter. What kind of clause? A protection. He adjusted his glasses again. If any family member attempts to pressure, threaten, or coerce you into surrendering the house, he tapped the page. They automatically forfeit any claim to the remaining estate. I blinked. Remaining estate? Whitmore nodded. Your grandmother left several investment accounts as well. Before I could respond, the office door opened quietly behind me. I turned and nearly stood up. Aunt Ruth? She smiled softly from the doorway. Your grandmother asked me to be here when you finally heard the truth. If this story is starting to make sense to you, stay with us. Strength grows quietly here. Because what Aunt Ruth revealed next explains something even more surprising. My grandmother had known exactly what my parents would try to do. Aunt Ruth closed the office door behind her and walked slowly across the room. For most of my life, my parents had described her the same way. Too outspoken. Too dramatic. Doesn't know when to stay quiet. As a kid, I believed them. Now I was starting to understand what that really meant. Ruth pulled out the chair beside me and sat down. Hello, sweetheart, she said softly. I was still trying to process everything Whitmore had just told me. You knew about this? I asked. She nodded. For 3 years. My head turned toward her. 3 years? Whitmore slid another document across the desk. Your grandmother drafted the will shortly after you moved in with her. Mrs. Ruth Mitchell was present as a witness. Ruth folded her hands together. Your grandmother called me the day after your parents suggested putting her in a nursing home. The memory hit me immediately. I could still see Grandma sitting quietly at the kitchen table that night after my parents left, staring out the window for a long time before she spoke. She told me, Ruth continued, that she wanted someone there who would tell the truth when the time came. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Her eyes softened. Because Eleanor didn't want you caring for her because you expected something in return. That answer landed deep. She wanted to know you were there because you loved her. I looked down at my hands. For 3 years I had measured medication, cleaned the kitchen, helped her into bed when walking became too painful. I never once asked about money. Not because I was noble. Because it genuinely never crossed my mind. Whitmore cleared his throat gently. Your grandmother was also very aware of the dynamics within your family. That's one way to put it, Ruth muttered quietly. Whitmore gave her a brief smile before continuing. She specifically warned that there might be pressure placed on you once her passing became public knowledge. Pressure. That word felt like an understatement now. She predicted last night almost exactly, Ruth added. My eyes widened. What? She told me, Patricia will make a scene. Richard will try to control the narrative. Megan will follow the money. The room fell silent for a moment. I leaned back slowly in the chair. She knew all of this would happen. Ruth nodded once. That's why she prepared you protection. Whitmore tapped the clause again. The coercion clause is legally binding. Meaning? I asked. Meaning if your family attempted to force you into surrendering the property. He paused. They may have just disqualified themselves from any remaining inheritance. A strange mixture of emotions moved through me. Relief. Sadness. And something else. Clarity. Because suddenly the dozens of missed calls on my phone made perfect sense. Some of you listening have had someone in your life who quietly believed in you when nobody else did. If you relate, say, I understand. Because the moment I walked out of that office, my phone started ringing again. And this time, I knew exactly why my family was panicking. By the time I stepped out of Whitmore's office, My phone was vibrating nonstop. Dad. Mom. Megan. Over and over again. I stared at the screen for a moment before finally answering one call. It was Megan. The second I picked up, her voice burst through the speaker. Holly, what did you tell the lawyer? I didn't tell him anything, I said calmly. You need to call him back, she snapped. There's been a mistake. A mistake? Yes. He said something ridiculous about the house belonging to you. I leaned against the brick wall outside the office building. That's not ridiculous, I said quietly. That's what Grandma wrote. Silence exploded on the other end of the line. Then Megan laughed nervously. No, Holly, you're misunderstanding. Grandma would never leave the house to just you. I didn't misunderstand, I replied. She did. The laughter vanished. Holly, listen, Megan said slowly. You know how Mom and Dad get when they're upset. Last night got out of hand. Out of hand. 200 witnesses. A $400,000 bill. My mother ripping my photos off the wall. Out of hand? I repeated. We were just trying to talk about the house like adults. That's not how it looked. Another pause. Then Megan lowered her voice. You don't need a whole house, Holly. The words hung there for a second. I need help, she added quietly. There it was. The real reason for the panic. I heard about the investments, I said. Her breath caught. Who told you that? Aunt Ruth. For a moment she said nothing. Then she exhaled sharply. Okay, yes, Kyle and I made a mistake. But that doesn't mean you get to sit on $600,000 while your family drowns. I closed my eyes briefly. That house isn't money, I said. It's my home. It could solve everything, Megan insisted. You could sell it, pay off the debts, help the family. The same family that billed me for being born. You mean help you? I said. Her voice hardened instantly. Unbelievable. Is it? You're being selfish, Holly. Maybe once those words would have crushed me. But standing there in the afternoon sunlight, something inside me stayed steady. I'm honoring Grandma's wishes. She wouldn't want you tearing the family apart. No, I said quietly. She wouldn't. And suddenly, Megan sounded desperate. Then prove it. She lowered her voice to a whisper. Come home tonight. Mom and Dad want to talk. I knew exactly what that meant. Another negotiation. Another attempt. Another performance. I ended the call without answering. Some of you listening already know that moment, the one where you realize the conversation was never about love. It was always about control. If this story feels familiar, you're not alone. Because, that evening, my entire family showed up at my apartment door. The knock came just after 7. 3 sharp taps. The kind that aren't really asking permission. Danny was in the kitchen heating leftovers when I looked through the peephole. My father, my mother, Megan, all 3 of them standing in the hallway like a committee. For a moment I considered not opening the door at all. But something inside me wanted to see their faces now that I knew the truth. I unlocked the door and pulled it open halfway. No invitation to come in. Holly, my father said quickly. His voice sounded different than it had 4 nights earlier. Softer. Less certain. We need to talk. So talk, I replied. My mother stepped forward immediately. Her eyes were red, but I had grown up long enough around her to know tears didn't always mean regret. Sweetheart, she said, reaching for my arm. I stepped back before she could touch me. You embarrassed us, she continued, her voice trembling. Walking out like that in front of everyone. I blinked. You tore my photos off the wall. That's not the point. My father cleared his throat impatiently. Let's stay focused, he said. Focused. Like this was still a meeting. Your grandmother's lawyer called us, he continued. And apparently there's been a misunderstanding. Danny quietly leaned against the kitchen counter behind me, arms crossed. He wasn't saying anything, but his presence filled the doorway like a silent wall. My father glanced at him briefly before continuing. The lawyer claims you're the sole beneficiary of the house. He's not claiming, I said. He's confirming. Megan stepped forward quickly. Holly, be reasonable. I am. You don't even need a house that big. You didn't need my car either, I said. Her cheeks flushed. That situation will be corrected. Oh? My father interrupted before she could respond. This isn't about cars, he said firmly. This is about family. I studied his face carefully. Was it about family when you billed me $400,000? His jaw tightened. That was a figure of speech. A figure of speech. 200 witnesses. A microphone. Printed spreadsheets. My mother tried again. We were emotional. You were organized, I said. Silence filled the hallway. Then Megan finally said what none of them had admitted yet. We need the house, Holly. There it was again. Need. Not apology. Not accountability. Just need. My father nodded once. Sell it. Split the money. Help your sister. I leaned against the doorframe. No. The word landed quietly. But it stopped the conversation completely. My mother's face hardened. You're choosing property over your own family? No, I said. I'm choosing not to be bullied anymore. The hallway fell silent. Tell me honestly, what would you have done standing in that doorway? Because what happened next changed everything my parents thought they controlled. For a few seconds, none of them spoke. The hallway light hummed softly above us, and somewhere down the corridor an elevator door opened and closed again. Normal sounds. Ordinary life continuing while my family stood there waiting for me to surrender something that was never theirs. My father recovered first. You're being emotional, Richard Dixon said, slipping back into the calm authority he used in business meetings. Let's talk like adults. We are talking like adults, I replied. No, he said firmly. Adults compromise. Behind him, Megan shifted uncomfortably. Holly, Kyle, and I are under serious pressure, she said quickly. The bank is calling every day. We just need time. If you sell the house now. I'm not selling it. She blinked like she hadn't heard me. You're not even living there. I will be. That answer seemed to catch them all off guard. My mother's eyes narrowed slightly. You're planning to move into that old place? Patricia asked, her tone almost offended. That old place was Grandma's home, I said quietly. And it's mine now. My father let out a slow breath through his nose. You're throwing away a solution that benefits everyone. No, I corrected. I'm refusing to fix a problem I didn't create. Megan's composure cracked first. You think you're so righteous, she snapped. But you're sitting on $600,000 while your own sister is drowning. I studied her face carefully. For the first time, I noticed how tired she looked. But tired didn't erase the memory of her taking my car keys while our mother destroyed my childhood photos. You didn't treat me like a sister 4 nights ago, I said. My father stepped forward. We made mistakes. You made a public spectacle. That was frustration. That was humiliation. The words settled between us like a line drawn in the hallway. No one crossed it. Finally, my father spoke again, quieter this time. Think about what you're doing, Holly. I already have. I gently pushed the door a little farther closed. If you ever want a real conversation, I said, start with an apology that doesn't involve money. Then I shut the door. Danny looked at me for a long moment. You okay? I exhaled slowly. For the first time in a long time, yes. Because sometimes the most powerful decision isn't winning an argument. It's refusing to keep playing the game. And if you've ever had to draw a boundary like that with people who thought they owned you, you understand how quiet strength really works. If that resonates with you, subscribe for strength. The hallway outside my apartment stayed quiet for a long time after I closed the door. Through the wood I could hear muffled voices, my father's low and controlled, my mother's sharp and emotional, Megan's rising and falling like someone trying to argue while running out of air. None of the words were clear, just tension pressing against the other side. Danny glanced toward the door. You want me to check if they're still out there? I shook my head. No. If they stayed, they stayed. If they left, they left. For the first time in my life, their reactions didn't feel like something I had to manage. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were steady, which surprised me more than anything that had happened in the last 4 days. Danny leaned on the counter. You handled that better than most people would. I spent 32 years practicing silence, I said. This is just a different version of it. He nodded slowly. Yeah, but this one looked more like a boundary. We stood there for a moment in the soft yellow light of the apartment kitchen. Eventually, the voices outside disappeared. A door down the hall closed. Then footsteps faded toward the elevator. They were gone. I didn't rush to the peephole to check. I didn't feel the need. Instead, I reached for my phone sitting on the table. 78 missed calls. My father, my mother, Megan, several aunts and cousins, even 2 of my father's business partners. News had clearly traveled far beyond the dinner party by now. I opened one voicemail from my father. His voice sounded tight, the way it used to when deals were collapsing at work. Holly, call me back. This situation has become complicated. Complicated. I almost laughed. 4 nights ago, he had been certain enough to stand in front of 200 people and present me with a bill for $400,000. Now things were complicated. I set the phone down again. Danny watched me carefully. You gonna respond? Not tonight. What about the lawyer? That question shifted something in my mind. Because until that moment, everything had been about reacting to my family. The confrontation, the accusations, the desperate calls. But the real center of this story wasn't their anger. It was my grandmother, her house, her will, her decision. I walked to the small desk by the window where the letter from Gerald Whitmore still sat. Tomorrow I would return to his office. There were papers to sign, documents to review, a house on the edge of town that technically belonged to me now, a place where my grandmother had spent 40 years of her life, a place where I had spent 3 years caring for her during the hardest chapter of hers. Danny followed my gaze. You thinking about moving there? Yes. Soon? I folded the letter carefully. Soon. For the first time since my birthday, the future didn't feel like something my family controlled. It felt like something quietly waiting for me to step into it. The next morning felt strangely calm. Not the forced calm of pretending everything was fine, but the kind that comes after a storm when the air is finally clear enough to breathe. I woke up earlier than usual, sunlight already pushing through the thin curtains of my apartment. For the first time in days, my phone wasn't vibrating. Either my family had finally stopped calling, or they were planning something else. Both possibilities felt equally believable. Danny was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee. You look like someone who actually slept, he said. Barely, I replied, taking the mug from him. But my brain finally stopped replaying that dining room. He nodded. He had heard the whole story twice by now, once in fragments the night I walked out of my parents' house, and again more clearly after the meeting with Whitmore. So, he said, leaning back in his chair. Lawyer day. Lawyer day. The words sounded heavier than they should have. Because going back to Whitmore's office meant something had shifted from emotional to official. Family drama was one thing. Legal documents were another. By 10 o'clock, I was sitting in the same leather chair across from Gerald Whitmore's desk. He greeted me with a quiet smile. Miss Dixon, I had a feeling I'd see you again soon. I imagine my family called you, I said. Whitmore adjusted his glasses. Several times. I raised an eyebrow. And I politely informed them that the contents of your grandmother's will are not open for negotiation. A small weight lifted in my chest hearing that. He opened the folder again and slid a stack of papers toward me. These are the property transfer documents confirming ownership of the house. I stared at the address printed at the top. Grandma Eleanor's home. The small white house with the blue shutters and the creaky porch swing. For a moment I could almost smell the jasmine she used to grow near the fence. Whitmore continued. There's no mortgage, no liens, and no outstanding taxes. Your grandmother kept meticulous records. That sounds like her, I said quietly. There's also the matter of the coercion clause, he added. I looked up. Yes. His expression turned more serious. Based on the description you provided about the dinner gathering and the pressure to sign away the house, your family may have already triggered that clause. I blinked. You mean? I mean that their attempt to force your decision in front of witnesses could legally eliminate any claim they might have had to the remaining estate. The room felt very still for a moment. I hadn't come here expecting consequences for them, just clarity for myself. Whitmore folded his hands calmly. Your grandmother understood family dynamics better than most. I thought about that night again. The microphone. The bill. The torn photographs. The car keys in Megan's hand. Grandma had known. Maybe not every detail, but enough. Whitmore slid a pen across the desk. Whenever you're ready. I looked down at the paper one more time. Then I signed my name. One steady line of ink. And just like that, the house officially became mine. The moment my pen left the paper, something inside me shifted. Not excitement. Not triumph. Just a quiet sense of finality. Gerald Whitmore gathered the documents carefully, stacking them with the kind of precision that comes from decades of handling other people's turning points. Congratulations, he said calmly. You are now the legal owner of Eleanor Mitchell's property. Hearing it spoken out loud felt different than reading it. Owner. Not caretaker. Not guest. Mine. Whitmore slid a copy of the signed deed toward me. You'll want to keep this somewhere safe. I nodded, folding the document carefully into the envelope he provided. As I stood to leave, another thought crossed my mind. My father said he transferred my car to Megan, I said. Whitmore paused. Your vehicle? Yes. At the dinner he claimed the title had already been put in her name. Whitmore frowned slightly. Was the car purchased with your funds? Yes. And registered under your name? Yes. Then he had no legal authority to transfer ownership. The answer came so quickly it almost made me laugh. So, Megan doesn't own it? No, Whitmore said plainly. Not unless you signed the title. I didn't. Then the transfer is invalid. I let that sink in for a moment. During the chaos of that birthday dinner, losing the car had felt like just one more thing being stripped away. But apparently even that had been an illusion. Whitmore opened another folder. If you'd like, I can file a formal correction with the Department of Motor Vehicles. Once processed, the registration will be restored fully in your name. Yes, I said. This time there was no hesitation. Let's do that. Whitmore gave a small approving nod. Your grandmother would appreciate that decision. I blinked. Why? He smiled gently. Because she specifically mentioned that car. That caught my attention immediately. She did? She said you bought it yourself after years of saving while working double shifts at the hospital. I nodded slowly. That's true. Whitmore leaned back slightly in his chair. She admired that about you, independence. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then I picked up the envelope and headed toward the door. Just before I left, Whitmore added one last thing. Miss Dixon? I turned. Yes? Your family may contact you again once they understand the legal situation. That's already started, I admitted. Whitmore gave a knowing smile. In my experience, clarity often brings urgency. Outside the office building, the afternoon air felt lighter than it had in weeks. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment looking down at the envelope in my hands. Inside it was proof of something my grandmother had always tried to teach me. That dignity doesn't come from winning arguments. It comes from knowing your worth long before anyone else acknowledges it. Across the street, my phone buzzed again. Another call from Megan. I watched the screen light up. Then slowly, I let it ring. The phone kept vibrating in my hand. Megan. Again. The third call in less than 5 minutes. I watched the screen for a moment before finally answering. Hello? Her voice came through instantly, tight with frustration. Where are you? That's an interesting way to start a conversation. Holly, stop doing that, she snapped. Just tell me where you are. Out. There was a pause, the sound of her breathing sharp and uneven. Did you go see the lawyer again? Yes. And? I leaned against the railing outside Whitmore's office building, watching cars move slowly through the intersection below. And everything he told me yesterday is correct. Silence. Then Megan exhaled loudly. You actually signed it. It was already signed. Today was just paperwork. That house belongs to the family. That house belonged to Grandma, I said calmly, and she decided who it goes to. Megan's voice hardened. You think this makes you special? No. You think you earned it? I think I showed up. Another long pause followed. When Megan spoke again, her voice was quieter but sharper. You don't understand how bad this situation is. I understand you lost money. It's more than that, she muttered. How much? She hesitated. 200,000. The number hung between us. I'm sorry you're dealing with that, I said. You could fix it. There it is again. What? The part where this becomes my responsibility. Megan laughed bitterly. You're unbelievable. Maybe. You're really going to sit in that house while your own sister loses everything? I closed my eyes briefly. I didn't create your debt. You could erase it. And what happens the next time? That question seemed to catch her off guard. There won't be a next time. Maybe, I said. But Grandma didn't leave me that house so I could bail people out. She left it because you manipulated her. The accusation landed harder than I expected. For a second, the noise of the street faded. Be careful with that word, I said quietly. Why? It's the truth. No, I replied. It's the story that makes this easier for you. She didn't respond, but I could hear the anger rising again. You always thought you were better than us, Megan said. No. You act like the saint of the family. I just took care of someone who needed help. That doesn't mean you deserve everything. I looked down at the envelope still in my hand. My grandmother decided what I deserved, I said. And she wrote it down. Megan's breathing grew louder through the phone. So that's it? She asked. That's it. You're choosing a house over your family. No, I said gently. I'm choosing myself. For a long moment she didn't speak. Then the call ended. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and started walking toward my car. The same car Megan thought she owned now. The same car that, according to Whitmore, had never legally left my name. For the first time since my birthday dinner, I allowed myself a small smile. Because my family had built their entire plan on assumptions. And one by one, those assumptions were collapsing. 2 days later, Whitmore called. I was finishing a shift at the hospital, still in scrubs, when his number appeared on my phone. Miss Dixon, he said calmly when I answered. I wanted to inform you that the vehicle registration correction has been processed. Meaning only one thing. My car is still legally mine, I said. Correct. And Megan? She currently has possession of property that belongs to you. Whitmore paused before adding, if you'd like, we can request its return formally. However, many clients prefer a simpler approach first. I knew what he meant. Ask. Give them the chance to return it without making things worse. That evening I drove to the house I had grown up in. The same driveway. The same trimmed hedges my father had always been proud of. But somehow the place looked smaller now. Less like a fortress. More like a stage where the curtain had already fallen. I knocked once. Megan opened the door. She looked tired. Not the dramatic kind of tired she used to perform at family gatherings, but the quiet exhaustion that comes when reality starts catching up. What do you want? She asked. My car. Her jaw tightened immediately. Dad said. Dad doesn't own it. I held out the printed registration Whitmore had prepared for me. She scanned the document quickly. For a moment she looked like she might argue. Then something shifted in her expression. Resignation, maybe. Without another word, she walked past me toward the driveway. A minute later, she returned with the keys. She didn't meet my eyes when she placed them in my hand. "Take it," she muttered. I nodded once. "Thank you." That was all. No lecture. No victory speech. Just the quiet return of something that had always belonged to me. I didn't linger in the driveway. The moment the keys touched my palm, I felt something settle quietly inside my chest. Not victory, just restoration. I walked to the car slowly. The same silver sedan I had bought 6 years earlier after working double shifts at the hospital for nearly a year. I remembered the day I drove it home, proud in the quiet way people are when they earn something without help. I slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. The familiar hum felt strangely comforting. In the side mirror, I saw Megan still standing near the front door. For a second, I thought she might say something. Apologize, argue, explain. Instead, she turned and walked back inside the house. The door closed behind her. And that was the end of it. I pulled out of the driveway and drove away without looking back. Halfway down the street, I noticed how light my hands felt on the steering wheel. Not because of the car itself, but because something else had quietly returned with it. Dignity. For years, I had convinced myself that keeping peace in the family meant accepting small humiliations. The jokes about my career. The comparisons to Megan. The way my parents treated my accomplishments like background noise. But the birthday dinner had made something clear. Peace built on silence isn't peace at all. It's permission. Permission for people to keep taking pieces of you because they assume you'll never stop them. At the next traffic light, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't my parents. It was Aunt Ruth. I answered through the car speaker. "Hello?" Her voice came through warm and steady. "I heard you got your car back. News traveled quickly in our family even now." "Yes," I said. "Good." She paused, then added quietly, "Your grandmother would have liked that." I smiled slightly as the light turned green. So would I. And for the first time since that terrible birthday, driving away didn't feel like running from my family. It felt like finally moving forward. A week later, I visited my grandmother's house again. Not as a caretaker this time. As the owner. The small white house sat at the end of the quiet road just like it always had. Blue shutters, the old maple tree leaning slightly over the porch. The wooden swing where Grandma and I used to sit during warm evenings, watching birds gather near the feeder. I unlocked the front door slowly. The air inside smelled exactly the same. Lavender. Old books. And the faint trace of the tea she used to drink every afternoon at 3. For a moment I stood in the doorway, letting the silence settle around me. 3 years of memories lived inside those walls. Late nights checking medications. Early mornings making oatmeal, because it was the only thing she could eat some days. Long conversations about life, regrets, and the strange ways families sometimes break without anyone noticing. I walked into the living room and ran my hand along the back of her favorite chair. It was still there by the window, just like she left it. Whitmore had been right about one thing: Grandma kept everything in perfect order. The house didn't feel abandoned. It felt paused. Waiting. I stepped onto the back porch and sat down on the swing. The chains creaked softly as it moved. Out in the yard, birds hopped around the feeder she had filled every morning for nearly 40 years. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the folded copy of the deed Whitmore had given me. My name sat printed clearly beside the property description. Holly Dixon. For most of my life, that name had felt tied to expectations I never chose. Now it meant something else. A fresh beginning. Not a dramatic one. Just a quiet reset. Inside the house, my phone buzzed once on the kitchen counter where I had set it down earlier. I didn't rush to check it. Whoever it was could wait. Because sitting there on the porch, listening to the wind move through the maple tree, I realized something simple but powerful. This house wasn't just an inheritance. It was proof. Proof that someone in my family had seen me clearly all along. And that one person had been enough. Later that evening, I finally checked my phone. 3 missed calls. All from my father. No messages. That alone told me a lot. My father was not a man who enjoyed leaving evidence of what he said when he was upset. If he wanted something handled, he preferred direct conversation. Or pressure. I stood in the quiet kitchen of my grandmother's house, the soft yellow light above the sink reflecting off the old tiled counter, and stared at his name on the screen. Richard Dixon. For 32 years, that name had carried authority in my life. It meant rules, expectations, approval I was always trying to earn. Now it was just a name on a phone. I called him back. He answered immediately. Holly. No greeting. No warmth. Just tension. I saw you went to the house, he said. I did. You're really planning to live there? Yes. There was a long pause. That house should have stayed in the family. It did, I replied calmly. His breathing sharpened slightly through the phone. You know what I mean. Yes, I said. I do. Another silence followed. When he spoke again, his voice sounded different. Less commanding. More tired. You've made your point. This wasn't about making a point. Then what was it about? I looked out the kitchen window toward the backyard where the porch swing moved slightly in the wind. It was about respect. The words seemed to land heavily between us. We raised you, he said. I know. And this is how you repay us? You billed me for being born. That ended the argument before it started. For several seconds he didn't respond. Then finally he said quietly, things got out of hand. Yes, I agreed. They did. He sighed. I'll talk to your mother. You should. And Megan. I waited. She's still dealing with the bank. I'm sorry she's struggling. But you're not helping. No. Another pause. Then my father said something that would have sounded impossible a week earlier. I suppose your grandmother knew what she was doing. I glanced around the small kitchen again. Yes, I said softly. I think she did. Neither of us spoke after that. Eventually, he ended the call. And for the first time in my life, the silence between us didn't feel heavy. It felt honest. 3 months later, autumn arrived quietly. The maple tree in the backyard had started turning red, and every morning a few more leaves gathered on the wooden porch where my grandmother and I used to sit together. Now it was just me. But the quiet didn't feel lonely. It felt peaceful. I had moved into the house fully by then. Not much had changed inside. I repainted one bedroom, replaced a few worn kitchen cabinets, and fixed the loose step on the front porch. Small things. Nothing that erased my grandmother's presence. Her favorite chair still faced the window. Her tea kettle still sat beside the stove. And every morning, just like she used to, I filled the bird feeder before making coffee. Some habits felt worth continuing. My parents never called again after that last conversation with my father. Not an apology. Not another demand. Just distance. Through Aunt Ruth, I heard bits and pieces of what happened afterward. My father's business had taken a few quiet hits after people from that birthday dinner started talking. My mother had stepped back from several charity committees she used to dominate. And Megan? She and Kyle eventually sold their house and moved back into my parents' place. I didn't feel victorious hearing any of that. Just sad. Because none of it had to happen. Families fall apart slowly, long before anyone notices the final break. Mine had probably been cracking for years. The birthday dinner had simply made the fractures visible. One evening, I sat on the porch swing watching the sunset stretch across the yard in warm orange light. In my hands was the last letter my grandmother ever wrote to me. The paper was soft from how many times I had read it. Live like you deserve to, sweetheart. For a long time I had believed that deserving meant earning approval. Working harder. Being quieter. Trying not to upset anyone. But sitting there on that porch, in the house she trusted me with, I finally understood what she meant. Deserving meant something simpler. Knowing your worth even when the people around you forget it. And choosing a life where you no longer need their permission to matter. If this story meant something to you tonight, subscribe. Power moves quietly. And if you're comfortable sharing, tell me where you're listening from. Because sometimes the people who understand these stories the most are the ones who have lived through something similar.